Welcome to Simulacra. My name is Bryson, and this is session 6 of building a decentralized application. In last session, we built out the user experience for deploying a community pool, and in today's session, we are going to build out the withdraw and fund community pool features. We're also going to build some backend and backend databases for our front-end microservices. We're going to be using Postgres as our relational database, and specifically Supabase. Supabase is a really easy way to create and spin up backends and backend databases in the cloud. So if you have any questions regarding system design, AI development, Web3, or anything that I talked about in today's video, comment down below in the comment section, and let's get into it. I hope you enjoy. So let's review the two features that I added after deploying the community pool feature was added. We have fund a pool and withdraw from pool. And so fund a pool, we just have community name and then the pool address and the transaction ID. Both of these are optional, as really the pool address is what's going to allow the system to match the address to what is on the blockchain that is inherent to this contract, whether it be Bitcoin or Ethereum. And so we need to put in an actual pool address or transaction hash. Right now, I don't have an actual checking system to verify that users are putting in a correct address in terms of number of units or in terms of number of characters and things like that. But I'm going to add those things later. So now we can say how much would you like to fund. I still need to get rid of this really ugly toggle bar. So we can fund a minimum amount, which is 5. So we can do that. And then I added also a current pool balance. This is mock. So if you are deploying to a new pool, then all of these would be 0. Or if you're deploying to an existing pool, they would have the existing balances and the tokens of that pool. So cool little addition that I added there. And then the review of your funding. And then you're able to fund. And so I don't actually have any pool that I funded yet. And so that will be added at a later date. So now we have withdraw from pool. And withdraw from pool also has the same setup as fund a pool. We'll put in random things right here. And so I added a verifying pool ownership loading screen. And this is going to allow the system to verify that the user is actually a owner of the community pool that they want to withdraw from. And so that's going to involve the system checking if there's actually a user. And then once that is verified, it will open up and say verified as user. You can continue. Right now, I don't actually have that background process going on, but when we set up our databases, that will help in knowing who is a owner and what can they do with community pools. And then you have how much you like to withdraw and the same available pool balances down here. And so I would type in the valid minimum amount and then a review of my entire withdrawal. And so I also added some spaces where the application holds open pools and closed pools. And these open pools would be linked to the actual Explorer or the block Explorer with it, whether that be Etherscan or the mempool. And so you would actually be able to click on this community pool and go to the Explorer to see all of your information and the contract that is associated with that pool. And then closed pools for historical reference to look back on. So now that we've created deploy, fund, and withdraw flows, and then also the address balance or community pool info service, and a way for users to log in and create accounts, we need databases for all of these things. And since none of our data is necessarily semantic, as in there needs to be context to the data, a lot of our data is going to be in table format. And so for these kinds of databases, we should use a relational database. For this app, we're going to use Postgres and specifically Supabase to build our backend databases. So let's head over to Supabase now. All right, so this is Supabase. Supabase is a open source way for developers to complete their backend for their applications without having to build and connect and configure a Postgres database. When you're regularly setting up a database, you have to set up the database, the authentication system, file storage, and APIs. And then with Supabase, you can just spin up a project and it's already there prepackaged out of the box. And this saves a lot of time. And we know that Supabase is very secure. A lot of people are using Supabase. 40% of YC-backed companies are using Supabase for their backend database needs. And so I think Supabase is going to be a very good use and tool for our application. And so let's go through setting one up, starting a project, and then making sure that Cursor can connect to Supabase using a MPC, Model Context Protocol, so that the large language model that Cursor is using can securely connect to and use external APIs and different tools and real-time data. All right, so we're on the Supabase website, and up here we'll press Start Your Project. And I'm going to use GitHub since we are pushing our Cursor project to GitHub. And so I think it makes sense to also have Supabase have access to that same GitHub. And so we already have access to it. So let's authorize Supabase. And so you may be asked to create a new organization, and organizations are just a way to group your projects together. So I'm just going to name mine Bryson's Apps, and this is going to be the organization that all of my applications backends live on. The type you can just choose as personal or any of the ones that best fits you. I'm just going to go over personal for right now. And then plan, we're going to start with the free plan. So let's create an organization. So now it's asking us to create a new project. So my project name will be Community Pool Dev. And I'm using dev because I want this to be the development environment for my backend for this application while we're building it. And then I will create a new project called Community Pool Production. And that's a way I'll be able to separate my environments so that I can make sure that my users are getting a really good product in production, and I can do all of my development without having to bring down production or alter production in any way. And I can make sure that my changes made to the development environment actually work before pushing to the production environment. All right, so we're on the Supabase dashboard for our Community Pool Dev environment. And so we're going to want to make sure that we add a MCP to Cursor from Supabase, or you can do it the other way where you're in Cursor and you would add Supabase's MCP to Cursor. So up top where it says connect, we're going to click connect, come over to MCP, connect your agent. We're going to click Cursor because that's what we're using, and then we're going to add Cursor by directly clicking this link right here, or we can actually add this configuration to a mcp.json file in Cursor and then save. And then also there's an optional install agent skills, which basically just has instructions and scripts and other things that will make Supabase work more accurately on Cursor. So I'm probably going to install that also. But let's click add to Cursor, and then it will ask you to open Cursor, and we already have Cursor open. And now we have to authenticate our connection. So let's press that, and then on my other screen is going to open up a Supabase screen, which is going to show authorizing API access for Cursor. So we want to authorize Cursor, and then it will ask us to open Cursor back over here, and then it should load all of the tools that Supabase uses. And so cool, now we have Supabase authenticated and installed through MCP. And now we can look at some Supabase tools that Cursor can use through this MCP connection. So tools like list tables and get logs will allow the agent in Cursor to output the database entries and the types of databases we have really easily. And as you can see, Supabase has a ton of different tools that you can use. So now we're actually going to develop a prompt to set up a database now that we have the MCP connection to Supabase from Cursor. And we're going to have the agents set up a database for when the user comes to the application and creates an account. and then also for the community pools when a user deploys a pool. And so I'm going to write those prompts and then show you exactly what I prompted the agent and then what it's going to output in terms of a database. And then we're going to go into Supabase and see our database live and test it. So we're going to start a new chat because we are starting a new context. And in this chat, I'm just going to have a pretty clear and simple prompt to use the Supabase MCP to connect to the existing project that we just created in Supabase Community Pool Dev and set up a connection. And so I also created a .env file for the Supabase password when I set up an account for Supabase. A .env file is just a plain text file that is used to hold environment variables, APIs, database credentials, port numbers, and other sensitive information that you don't want to include in your actual code. And so we'll put our .env file inside of our get_ignore file for the type of files that we need to ignore. And so your get_ignore file is all of the things that you do not want to push up to GitHub. And so it allows all of those sensitive details and sensitive information features to remain on your local device. And so we're going to let the agent plan out this prompt and then see what it comes up with. And so it looks like our agent is telling us exactly what we want it to do. We are going to link the MPC to the community pool dev in Supabase, and then we're going to get the project URL and keys and then update the .env file we've made in the community pool project in Cursor. So I'm going to build and let the agent do its thing. So next we're going to actually set up the database in Supabase, but using the agent in Cursor. And I've already created a prompt to post for the agent so that we have clear instructions on exactly how to create this database in Supabase. And so we have this login feature with Supabase authentication. And so we have a overall title of set up this user account creation and login feature with Supabase authentication. In the notes section, we want to use our existing UI components for sign in and log in and sign up. So as you can see over here, I have a way for the user to sign up and then log in if they already have an account. And so we want to make sure we use our existing UI components for that piece. So then we're going to use the Supabase MCP and we're going to create a user profiles table so that the users can have individual accounts when they sign up. And the application should look different for each user's account. And so we'll get into that later when we talk about row level security. And so for right now, I just want the user profiles table to have the username, email address, and password. And then of course, we will add in some other aspects of our know your client policies later when the user goes to make their first deployment for a community pool. We also want the agent to create a pop-up model after users sign in or log in so that users have to authenticate their accounts with a generated code that is sent to their email. So if you've ever signed into any account and you get a code, whether you're signing into your bank account or you're signing into some other authenticated service, and you go to your email that you then have to put into the application. We're going to have that exact same security measure here. And then we're also going to make sure that our application has row level security. And so row level security is just a database and data analytics security feature that restricts data access at the row level based on the user roles, the permission, or the context. And so row level security is pretty simple. It's basically just making sure that you have policies so that users can only see and modify their own accounts. And so you might have a system-wide database where all user profiles are located in that database, but row level security allows each user to have an individual account that they can actually make changes to. And those changes will only show to that user on that account. And then I also told the agent that the .env file with the keys, the Supabase anonymous keys and the URL key already exist. And so our agent will have access to all of the keys and passwords that we need. So let's let the agent create a plan for this prompt. We'll run the plan and then we'll get to test if our database is actually live in Supabase, and when we sign up for an account on the community pool application, it sends us through an authentication process and then signs us in, and then we can see the different accounts listed in our user profiles table on Supabase. So we're back in Supabase on the dashboard for the community pool development project. And so we're going to go to the left and go to authentication, and then we're going to go down to URL configuration, and you're going to put in your site URL or your development URL or your production URL for your application. So we already did that. And then I also added that URL as my redirect URL so that the authentication providers were permitted to redirect to post that actual authentication. And then next you want to go up to sign in and providers, go over to email, and then make sure that your enable email provider is on. And so this enables that there is an email-based sign up and login for your application, and that there is some sort of authentication for when users sign into your account. And then there are also other settings that you can use, minimum password length, the requirements, and so on. I set mine for 10. I think in my application it says 14 right now, but I'm going to set 10. I think that's a good password length. And then we have the required symbols and digits, the recommended one, so that our password is very strong. And then the actual length of the numerical code that the application will send to users when they're authenticating their sign-in. So now that our agent is done with the prompt we just gave it, we want to test if the application sends users a numerical code when they're signing up or logging back into the application. And then we want to see if those created accounts are populated in our user profiles table on Supabase. So let's sign up for an account. We'll pick Satoshi. All right, so a confirmation was sent to my email, but it wasn't exactly a code confirmation. It was simply a link saying follow this link to confirm your user, and I confirmed that using the link. I want it to be a little bit more secure in that the system will make the user put in an actual 6-digit code, but still having them confirm to a link on their own account means that the user that is using this email to log into my application actually has access to the actual email that is being used. And so I'm okay with that level of security right now. So let's see if we can log back into the application using the credentials that we use to sign in. And then we'll go to Supabase and see if that user is actually populated in the user profiles table. So back in Supabase, if we go to authentication and then we go to users, we can see that we now have one user, Satoshi, display name, email address, the email they provided, and then what date they were created at, and then some other things we can do with the user, such as delete them, ban them, and reset their password from Supabase itself. So in today's session, we were able to set up databases back in databases for our application, and we set up a database for the create an account service. And then in the next sessions, we're going to be setting up our databases for the address balance and then the actual community pool deploying funding and withdrawing services. So I hope you learned a lot about Supabase and backend databases and how easy it is to set up your own database for your application. Ask any questions that you may have down below in the comment section. Remember to support this video, like, subscribe, send to your friends, and you've been watching another video from Simulacra. I'm Bryson, and I'm out. Bye, everyone.